Linda Carver had always believed in something called unconditional love, especially when it came to family. For decades, she built her world around her husband and their only daughter, Julia. Every meal she cooked, every holiday she planned, every dollar she saved felt like it existed for one purpose: to keep her family whole. When her husband died of cancer, the life she knew collapsed. At 58, she felt the earth open beneath her feet. But she told herself she still had Julia. She still had her daughter. The house in Cedar Park, the one Linda and her husband had built from scratch, became too heavy to live in. Every corner whispered memories, late-night laughter, the scrape of his slippers on the kitchen floor, the warmth of the life they had once shared. So she sold it, telling herself it was time to move forward. Julia and her husband, Derek Miller, offered her a place to stay. Or rather, Julia did. Derek barely lifted his eyes from his phone the day Linda moved into their apartment. Linda tried to take up no space. She stayed in the small back room, cooked meals, cleaned quietly, offered to run errands. She tried to be helpful, tried to be invisible, but Derek had a way of making her feel like a burden, like a splinter under his skin. He rolled his eyes when she spoke. He changed the TV when she was mid-show. Once, as he passed her in the hallway, she heard him mutter, "Freeloader." Julia brushed it off. "He's stressed," she said. "Work's been rough." Linda swallowed the shame because that was what mothers did. But everything snapped during one quiet dinner. Linda had made chicken pot pie, Derek's favorite. The table sat under a heavy silence. Julia scrolled on her phone. Derek sipped his beer, as usual. Then he looked up and said, "You know, maybe it's time we stop pretending this is temporary. We're not a charity." Linda stared at him. "What do you mean?" Derek smirked. "How long is this supposed to go on? You're not working. You're not contributing. We've got bills. We didn't sign up for extra mouths to feed." Linda turned to Julia, desperate for help, for a word, a glance, something. But Julia kept her eyes down. "Maybe it's best," she whispered, "if you find something more stable. For everyone's sake." Linda didn't argue. She didn't cry. She walked to her room, packed 2 suitcases, the last physical remains of her life, and left the apartment. Julia didn't walk her to the door. Derek didn't say goodbye. Linda stood outside their building in the cold, wind biting through her coat, and realized she had nowhere to go. That night she checked into a cheap motel, the kind where the wallpaper peeled and the vending machine ate your change. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, sending Julia gentle messages in the days that followed. "I understand. I love you always." Then later, "I'm okay. Just wanted to know how you are." But Julia never replied. Linda applied for jobs, but no one wanted to hire a grieving widow in her late 50s with no recent work history. The loneliness became suffocating. One night, sorting through the only box of keepsakes she'd managed to bring, Linda found her mother's old diary. She opened it and found the words that would change everything. The diary felt fragile in Linda's hands, its leather soft and worn from years of quiet keeping. She sat on the edge of the motel bed, the hum of the old air conditioner filling the silence around her. For a long moment, she simply stared at the first page, unsure whether she was ready to revisit a past she had never truly known. But something deep inside, loneliness maybe, or the ache of being discarded, pushed her to read. Her mother's handwriting swept across the pages in looping strokes, warm and familiar. At first, the entries were simple, ordinary, small observations about church socials, the scorching Texas heat, groceries that cost too much, and Linda as a little girl, mundane lines that felt like a soft blanket over bruised skin. Then everything shifted. A single entry, dated early summer, carried a tone her mother had never used around her, a tone filled with longing, fear, and something like heartbreak. "He came again today. Said he wished things were different, that he wished I could be his wife. But he has a family, a business, a name to protect. Linda will never know. She must. Never know. Linda blinked, jolted upright. She reread the lines, hoping she had misunderstood, but the words did not change. Her heartbeat thudded loud in her ears as she turned the pages more quickly now, searching for clarity, for context, anything. Several entries followed the same thread. Meetings behind closed doors, discreet help offered in quiet envelopes, a man burdened by a life of expectations he refused to abandon. Her mother wrote about him with a tenderness Linda had never imagined, and always signed the entries with a trembling resolve. She must never know. There was no full name, only initials, HR S. But something inside Linda stirred. She recognized the rhythm of those letters, the way they felt familiar without knowing why. It was a name she must have heard in passing, on the news, in old conversations, in the background of her childhood. She kept reading. Midway through the diary, nearly hidden between winter entries, she found the one that would crack her world open. He says he's made arrangements. If anything happens to him, Linda will not be left with nothing. He promised a trust, a letter. His lawyer, Mr. Hartwell, will know. He swore she would be cared for. Linda's breath caught. She clutched the diary to her chest as if it could steady her, but her hands trembled too violently to hold still. She closed her eyes and felt the motel room tilt around her. Her mother had carried this secret alone. Her father, whoever he was, had wanted Linda to have something of him. And all these years, Linda had believed she had no one left in the world. When she finally opened her eyes again, she was no longer just a woman abandoned by her daughter. She was a woman standing on the edge of a truth, buried for decades. The initials haunted her. The lawyer's name echoed in her mind. Mr. Hartwell. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat at the tiny motel desk, lit by a flickering lamp, and wrote down every detail from the diary, every date, every clue, every whispered promise her mother had once tried to protect. By dawn, she made a decision. She would find Samuel Hartwell, and she would demand the truth about RHS. Whatever her mother had tried to hide, whatever her father had left behind, Linda was done being erased. She was ready to claim the part of her life she had never known belonged to her. Linda couldn't shake the weight of her mother's diary. The initials, RRHS, the secret meetings, the promises. Each page felt like a door opening into a past she had never known existed. The name Mr. Hartwell stayed fixed in her mind. He was the only link to the truth her mother had tried to bury. Using the motel's slow public computer, she searched for him. After hours of loading screens, she found a listing. Samuel Hartwell, retired estate attorney, Dallas. Linda didn't trust her voice enough to call. Instead, she wrote a handwritten letter explaining who she was, mentioning her mother's name, and asking, carefully, almost fearfully, if he had ever known Eleanor Carver. 2 weeks later, her motel phone rang. Miss Carver, an older voice said softly, I knew your mother. I always wondered when you might reach out. There is something you should see. The next morning, with one suitcase and the diary in her bag, Linda boarded a Greyhound to Dallas. When she stepped into Hartwell and Pierce Legal Group, the quiet dignity of the office made her feel as if she were walking into another life. You look just like her, Mr. Hartwell murmured before handing her a sealed, yellowed envelope. It was addressed to my daughter, Linda Louise Carver. Her breath stilled. Inside was a letter from Raymond Hale Stanton, the founder of Stanton Energy, a man whose face had been on newspapers and business articles for decades. A man with wealth, a legacy, and a secret. Raymond confessed everything: the affair, the love he couldn't claim publicly, the guilt he carried, and finally, the promise. If anything happens to me, Samuel will deliver what belongs to you. Mr. Hartwell slid a folder toward her. Bank accounts, investments, assets totaling over $1 million, all placed quietly in trust for Linda alone. She didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She simply held the letter, letting the truth settle into the empty parts of her life. She hadn't been unwanted. She hadn't been forgotten. Her mother had protected her. Her father had provided for her. That night in the motel, for the first time since losing her home, Linda felt something steady beneath her again. Not revenge, not triumph. A beginning. Returning to Austin, Linda no longer felt like the woman who had stood outside Julia's building with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go. She booked a short-term rental downtown, a small modern apartment with clean walls and quiet evenings. It was the kind of place Julia and Derek would never imagine she could afford. She began dressing differently, walking differently, thinking differently. Days were spent watching real estate tutorials, learning contracts, studying property codes. She didn't want an empire. She wanted security. She wanted never to be powerless again. And then she found it. A property auction listing, almost hidden, a distressed apartment building in East Austin. Old, worn down, but structurally sound. The address hit her like a jolt. It was the building where Julia and Derek lived. The owner had defaulted on taxes. The auction was scheduled in 2 weeks. Linda stared at the screen, heart pounding, not with hatred, but with something colder, more focused. Not revenge, not punishment, correction. With Mr. Hartwell's help, she formed an anonymous LC Properties Group and placed her bid. The auction came and went quietly. She won. Just like that, Linda Carver owned the building where she had once begged for a shred of dignity. A month later, official notices went out to every tenant, lease reviews, updated terms, new rent amounts based on market values. For most tenants, the changes were minor. For Julia and Derek, it was triple, market rate, plus previously ignored surcharges. Linda didn't need to witness Derek's reaction to know it was volcanic. She imagined the shouting, the pacing, the blame. His ego couldn't tolerate losing control, not of money, not of Julia, and certainly not of the building. Julia called 2 days later, her first call since the night Linda left. "Mom, something's wrong. The rent. Derek's losing it. Can we talk?" Linda let it go to voicemail. She drove by the building once at night, lights on, shadows moving behind the curtains. Julia pacing, Derek's furious silhouette. She didn't stop. She didn't need to. This wasn't revenge. This was gravity, the weight of their choices finally falling where it belonged. And Linda, standing under the streetlight with the keys to the entire building in her bag, felt something she hadn't known in years, power that didn't need a single word. The tenants' meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday evening, held in the building's common room. Linda arrived early, wearing a charcoal blazer and her hair in soft waves. Nothing extravagant, but enough to ensure no one recognized the woman who once lived in a small back room and left in tears. She sat quietly while residents filtered in, murmuring about renovations and new management. Then Derek stormed in. He moved with the restless anger of a man who believed the world owed him answers. Julia followed behind him, shoulders tight, eyes down. Derek marched straight to the property manager. "I want the owner here," he snapped. "Today." The manager kept his voice even. "All questions will be addressed shortly," the presentation began. Security upgrades, repairs, landscaping improvements. Then the manager paused and said, "We'd like to thank the owner of LC Properties Group for the improvements. She is here today if anyone has questions." Linda rose from her seat. The room fell silent. Julia's head jerked up. Derek froze, confusion twisting into shock. "You?" he spat. "This is a joke." "No," Linda said softly. "Just business." Derek surged forward, voice shaking with rage. "You manipulated this. You raised our rent. You're trying to ruin us." Linda held his gaze. "I treated every tenant the same. I did not forget how you treated me, but I didn't have to punish you. You did that yourself." Julia stepped between them. "Derek, stop." He turned on her, stunned. "What did you just—" "I said stop," she repeated, voice trembling but firm. "She's not your enemy. You are." The words hung in the air like a breaking spell. Julia's shoulders sagged as if something inside her had finally cracked. The meeting ended. Derek stormed out alone. 4 days later, Julia appeared at Linda's apartment holding the faded leather diary. Her voice was soft, uneven. "I read it. I know everything now. I left him, Mom. I'm done." Linda studied her for a long moment. Julia looked older, but clearer somehow, like someone stepping out of a long, dark room. "I don't expect forgiveness," Julia whispered. "I just want to try." Linda didn't speak. She simply opened the door wider. Some wounds didn't heal with apologies. Some healed with truth, with effort, with choosing differently. Weeks later, with the lawsuit against Derek settled and the building sold, Linda moved into a small home in Cedar Park, a place with oak trees, a porch swing, and peace. Julia helped her carry boxes. They shared grilled cheese and tomato soup, laughing softly over burnt bread and childhood memories. No dramatic reconciliations, just quiet, honest beginnings. That night, Linda stood by the window of her new home, holding a warm cup of tea. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, she felt whole. Not because she won, not because she became powerful, but because she finally remembered who she was and stopped needing anyone else to validate it.